Welcome to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire, a series that digs deep into the life and works of one of the greatest novelists of all time. Hi everyone, happy Christmas. Today's guest is the inimitable Harry Christophers, founder and conductor of one of the world's greatest choirs, the 16. For over 40 years, Harry and his award-winning ensemble have performed throughout Europe, Asia, Australasia, and the Americas. Each singer that joins the ranks of the choir and each instrumentalist, the period orchestra, is a highly sought-after soloist and session musician in their own right, but they also remain a part of this amazing ensemble. The sound of the 16 is truly unique and overwhelmingly powerful, as you will soon hear. Who better than Harry, then, to take us on a thrilling journey now through Christmas carols both ancient and modern, many of which surfaced during that revival of the 19th century, and many that were written this decade, but still form a part of a continuum that echoes down the centuries, both before and after Dickens's time. And of course, the carol sung at Scrooge's keyhole is featured here too. For 13 years, Harry was also an artistic director of the Handel and Haydn Society, which leads us neatly back to Dickens again, since Handel is clearly the most mentioned of all the composers in Dickens's novels. In fact, when I spoke to Harry, he had just conducted his annual performance of The Messiah at London St. Martin-in-the-Fields Church, and as this piece is today synonymous with Christmas, he guides us through the stunning architecture of Handel's writing also. And before we begin, I also wanted to let you know that there are Apple and Spotify links to every piece of music you are about to hear, many of which are taken from the 16's most recent Christmas album, The Carol of the Bells. My thanks in advance also to the Coro label for granting me permission to use these excerpts. It's time to meet Harry.
Hi there, Dominic.
Good morning, Harry. How are things?
Not too bad, thank you very much.
I'm so thrilled because I've been wanting to do an episode on actual Christmas carols for such a long time, and you're the perfect man for the job, because Christmas carols have been in your life for an extraordinarily long time, haven't they?
They have.
Where do they start for you? Where do they come from? Where in your life did they capture you?
Oh gosh. Well, I was born in a pub. This is always the interesting thing for people who at Christmas, because I was born in a pub on Boxing Day. So I wrecked Christmas for my parents, but my dad, I think, well, actually, having said that, I didn't wreck it for my dad. I think he was enjoying a few pints with the local farmers in this pub. We lived in the middle of Kent in a little village called Gouthurst, and the Peacock Inn was where I was born. My dad was the landlord, and what I remember, I mean, we left there when I was about 8. But I do remember singing carols with my mum playing the piano with the local farmers. So it was literally just all the traditional ones. But it wasn't until I went, I was very lucky to be a chorister at Canterbury Cathedral. We had to move to Canterbury when my dad had to give up the pub. And then, honestly, I mean, I'd never been in the cathedral. I don't think I've been really in any churches really much. But to be in Canterbury Cathedral, particularly at Christmas time, that was special.
And so with your mother, the traditional carols, what would you be singing from? Would you be singing from lead sheets or choral scores, or what was it?
I have no idea. I suppose we just learned. It was a sort of usual sort of 6 or 8 carols, and we just sort of learnt them. But there's a hilarious thing, because I once asked my mum. My mum asked me. I would have been about 6, I suppose, 5 or 6. She asked me what I wanted for tea, and I said, "Can I have some dread?" And my mother looked at me in total disbelief. Thought, what the heck's this kid talking about? And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, can I have some of what the angels had?" And then she sort of tweaked Christmas. The mighty dread, or Shepherd's Watch, etc. The mighty dread, the mighty. So that was it. So yeah, they sort of stuck in. But yeah, I don't know. I think the one thing about carols is that, we all know about half a dozen. They're all the usual ones. Come with his faithful, hark the herald angels sing, once in royal, while Shepherd's Watch. I probably said them all there, you see. Good King Wenceslas, And then, bit by bit, we've sort of dribbled one or two others. And I think, carol services, for instance, at Canterbury, they did contain, all the usuals. But I do remember, wonderful thing was, as a chorister, was going down We'd be in our cassocks, we had lanterns, and we used to go down to the local to the Canterbury car park, which used to be just off St Margaret Street. It's where the Marlow Theatre used to be. It was a big car park, and there was the Sally Army Band there, and we would sing along with them, and all the locals in Canterbury were there. And I remember one year it was snowing, so it was just idyllic. It was just that sort of thing of you see on film, good Christmas films. It was just that was it.
This is so interesting, Harry, just to hear your background immediately, having the carols in the pub and at Canterbury Cathedral, because what I love about Christmas carols are the wildness, the frostiness, the harshness, a bit like a piece of holly. You can still cut yourself obviously on a thorn, that there's a darker underbelly to some of them, and they're haunting, and they seem to encapsulate so much, even the most traditional ones with the most traditional arrangements. Your recent work with your choir, the 16, The Carol of the Bells, there are breathtaking carols on that. Would you tell us a little bit about that and what led you to put that one together?
Yes, I mean, it's interesting with carols because, the origin of a carol is a round dance. That's what it meant. And, you go way back to medieval times and the way that was done. And I think, today there are a lot of composers that hark back to those sort of more medieval times. They like the text. And as you just said, that carols aren't all just about joy and happiness. Passion carols talk about the whole Christian year. In verse 1 and 2, they bring in the Nativity, but then it goes to Passiontide, and you get the whole cycle of the Christian year.
I have a few favourites from your Carol of the Bells. Obviously, the Carol of the Bells itself, which is a fantastic, quite a wild Ukrainian melody, isn't it?
It's a Ukrainian one. I mean, famous for, what is it, Home Alone? I think it appears in Home Alone.
That's where I first heard it.
Yeah, it's incredibly catchy, but that's your secular Christmas. What I've tried to do on this particular CD was have a blend of the modern with some traditional ones. And I would really stress the traditional carols because, as I said before, we know half a dozen that are churned out every single year. But years ago, Peter Warlock, Ralph Vaughan Williams, Martin Shaw, they went up and down the country collating carols from all over the United Kingdom. And it's fascinating, delving into those. There's some wonderful tunes, and we just don't hear some of those today. And I'm gradually, over the various Christmas CDs the 16 are produced, I've tried to introduce some. So, we have the Song's Day Carol on this album, which is, it's not, Song's Day Carol. You think, oh, okay, this must be French, but no, it's a Cornish carol. But there are some fabulous modern carols. I mean, a lot of that is down to King's Cambridge and the Lessons and Carols service, because each year a new carol is commissioned by them, and so over the years that's built up into quite a lot of pieces. And I get a lot of Christmas music sent through from various publishers, and I sift it through and I see what is going to work in a program, what's going to work text wise. I have to confess, there's a lot of what I would call substandard music out there, but there's a lot of really good stuff. And, like famous composers, obviously, like Herbert Howells, William Walton, the days of yore, Richard Rodney Bennett, who wrote fantastic carols. And in the modern day, we've got the likes of Bob Chilcott, Cecilia McDowell, John Rutter.
Yeah. They're mind-blowing. They're sort of earth-shattering, aren't they? They're so moving and powerful. I find them quite overwhelming to listen to. Something you mentioned also that's very interesting is about the ancient and the modern. And oddly, I don't know what you think about this, but sometimes, say, a carol that was harmonized by the great Stainer can sound more recent than something composed 2 years ago because of the harmony or the feel or the fire in it. There's something more medieval or ancient about something like Cecilia McDowell's Of a Rose, for example.
Yes, no, you're right. What a lot of composers did who, somebody like William Walton, for instance, and Richard Rodney Bennett, who hark back a lot to sort of medieval times. They put their own take on what is an old text. I'm thinking of William Walton, Make We Joy Now in This Fest. Now, it's basically got the same idea as the old medieval carol, and it's got this sort of medieval feel about it. It's quite very, very rhythmic idea. And of course, those texts are really interesting because they're what are called macaronic texts. They're in English and Latin. And there's something really special about it. And when you hear a modern composer do that take on it, it's still earthy, but they've got a little modern twist. But what you've got with the traditional carols, with the likes of Ralph Vaughan Williams in particular, I'm thinking of This Is the Truth Sent From Above. I mean, it's just beautiful. And those sort of composers, they never wreck the tune. And that's what I have a bit of an aversion to big arrangements, complex arrangements, which sort of get in the way of the tune. I know why they're done. And they've sort of popularized the carol. But actually, there's something even more popular when you just sing it as it originally was. And we do a lot. I mean, we always put in our Christmas concerts, we always put two or three carols in. This year I've got See Amid the Winter Snow. And I just have the verse sung in unison by the men or the ladies, and the chorus is harmonized. And audiences absolutely love it. All these carols tell a story. I think that's what I'm getting at, Dominic, that all these carols tell a story. And if you start putting too much into the music and a bigger arrangement, you're destroying that story. We're not really hearing the text come through. And that's why I find it so beautiful to do a traditional carol. And on the Carol of the Bells, we've got various ones. We've got Wassail's Song, we've got Herrick's Carol, we've got Sansonet Carol.
Yeah.
These have gone out of regular use, and they shouldn't. They should be back in. And actually, I think they are coming back in, which is great.
Yes. On the Carol of the Bells album, which I also love, is one of my all-time favourites, which is This Have I Done for My True Love, Gustav Holst. Not the Tomorrow Shall Be My... Not that.
No.
And I just think that's astonishingly good, isn't it, that one? And the melody for its start, I assumed it was a traditional folk melody. It's not. He composed it. So the idea that carols inspire these great composers as well, and they absorb the folk tradition and take that on.
Yes. Oh, you're dead right. I mean, that is a fantastic setting. I mean, it's always difficult when I'm programming Christmas music to actually find something that's longer than 3 minutes, and the Holst is, and that's great. And actually, just coming back to what I was saying before about passion carols, of course, the Holst is exactly that. This Have I Done for My True Love, but it takes us through the passion story as well. It's not just about Christmas. And it's just a fascinating way he just brings that whole story to life. The Liturgic Christian Year in 5 minutes.
It's amazing, isn't it? But because also, obviously, there are many stanzas to that one, aren't there? And he's able to meld the tune and adapt it and go through all these twists and turns to tell the entire story. But there's something else that I don't know if you've ever experienced this with any of the choral works, but with this specific one, when I first heard it, I thought there were more than 4 parts to it. Yeah. And I was astonished to see the score and think, oh, it's actually 4-part. And rose again,
again, that's something that a lot of modern composers, it's been a sort of trend, for a lot of sort of what I call homophonic music, when everybody is singing at exactly the same time. I mean, fantastic music. I mean, I can think of Whitaker's Lux Orumque. It's absolutely beautiful. Morton Larison and Mani Mistrean. They are fabulous pieces. I'm not saying they're not, just, but they are very chordal, and the atmosphere that's created is just fantastic. But when you get a composer that's actually like Holst, is interested in counterpoint, and voices not singing exactly at the same time, and a lot of textual variety, a lot of dynamic variety, then that's brilliant, and I just love it.
May I mention also from this album, Jan Sandstrom's Lo, How a Rose Ere Blooming. Now this is very interesting, isn't it? Because obviously it's combining a very ancient carol in a more modern setting. You might even describe it as ambient music almost, this setting.
I think you've got it exactly correct. Ambient setting, that's a perfect description of it, Dominic, because it's taking Pretorius's it's incredibly well-known tune, known all over the continent, and Sandstrom just had these harmonies underneath that set a wonderful atmosphere. I mean, it's so quiet. Very difficult for us to perform, because actually to do it real justice, you need about 30 odd singers to actually sustain those wonderful chords beautifully. I mean, my singers, they do it, and they do what they call stagger the breathing. So one singer, breathes at a slightly different part from another singer, but we've managed to keep that sort of seamless sound to it, without any tricks of recording. So it's great. And again, audiences absolutely love it, because they're taken into a different sound world. At first quite a modern sound world, but then suddenly you've got the 16th century sound over the top.
Yes, it's very moving, isn't it? And what's it like for you emotionally working on this material sometimes when you're rehearsing it and conducting in front of an audience, when it's a supercharged atmosphere and you can feel everything change around you?
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, some of them are relatively easy. Most of them I have to keep on saying to the choir, look, you're telling a story. You've got to communicate that story. It's very easy for singers to get wound up in a sound world of their own, and make a fantastic sound and think that's it. And I think one of the strengths of the 16 is that when we perform, be it on CD or in concert, in a Christmas concert, that we are communicating with the audience. We're telling that story, and if that story happens to be in Latin, we've got to work harder to tell that story by the way we're inflecting the music. I mean, one of the things I really love on this particular CD are Bob Chilcott's Advent Antiphons. Bob's an old friend of mine. We used to sing together at Westminster Abbey and in the BBC Singers, and then of course he spent quite a few years in the King's Singers and in sort of what I would call the second heyday of the King's Singers, who had the original lot, and then one or two of those left, and it became very much became the Bob Chilcott days of, and Bob won't mind me saying it, he was one of the best crooners out there. And now as a composer, he's fantastic. And what he does, he writes so well for singers. All my singers love singing his music. But B, he really does communicate with an audience. They create something very special. And this particular CD opens with a sort of 7/8 Pilgrim Jesus, which is very ebullient. It's great. Then his Advent antiphons, which are spectacular. And the O antiphons, they were their Advent season. They would, I think what happens liturgically, I think an O antiphon precedes the Magnificat, I think, in the service of evensong, and that will be done in all the cathedrals and big churches up and down the country. A plain song, no antiphon. But Bob wrote his own settings of this based around the plain song, idea. But he's created something really special. I mean, I can't remember how many parts he goes. He goes into 8 parts. Sometimes I think he goes into more than that. And he has what I call, there's 1 or 2 minutes, which he has what I call cells. So each singer is singing that cell, but they're singing it at a different time from their neighbor. So you might have, say, 6 sopranos on one cell, but they're all singing it at different times and at different speeds and at different moods. But it creates a incredible atmosphere. And it's a technique been used by many composers sort of over the last 20, 30 years. But Bob really makes it work.
Obviously, you were a chorister as well, Harry. Do you think that's massively informed the way you conduct the choir? Because I always, when watching conductors myself, I'm always curious to know how much they have to work their musicians and how much they have to give the musicians space and how much of it is almost telepathic, what's passing between you.
Well, I'm talking about the 16. That's the thing. I mean, they're just brilliant, and we feed off each other, and that's always been. I will come with my. With all these pieces, it doesn't matter if it's just a trad carol or a Latin setting of a antiphon or a modern piece. I'll come with my own interpretation of that. And if something doesn't work, we'll change it. But the thing about when we're performing the music is that the choir know that they need to keep their eyes up all the time, because I'll do something different each time to keep the music alive. When we're doing, I think we've got something like 6 or 8 programs of performances of the Christmas program this year. So, to keep it fresh, I will do slightly different things. And they're super performers. And and communication is what we are all about. And as soon as that becomes, in concert, it ever becomes routine, then I'll try and click it into place and just make sure, all it takes is an eye, someone, and everybody is back in the zone and communicating.
Yes, I suppose because there is the danger possibly, if you're doing Hark the Herald with Mendelssohn's harmonizations, to slip into autopilot, possibly with the best intention in the world. And it's that thing of, I suppose, bringing it back and coining it as a new thing in that moment that's never been sung before.
Yeah, exactly that. And as I said before, when we put a traditional carol in, and I remember last year's Christmas program had past 3 o'clock, but it's got something like 6, maybe now 8 verses, it's many verses, and you've got to keep it interesting, and it has a different life than what you would hear in a cathedral choir. Or we tend to sort of milk the words and make them really come alive.
Past 3 o'clock, and a cold frosty morning. Past 3 o'clock, good morrow, masters all. All is a day, gentle as May. Son of eternal Father supernal. Past 3 o'clock, and a cold frosty morning. Past 3 o'clock, good morrow, masters all.
There's something pleasing about past 3 o'clock, just the fact that it's telling the time.
Yes, I know.
Something I can't explain it, but it's something very appealing about that, listening to go, oh, right, yes, here we are. It's a frosty day, we're outside, and we can see the clock tower, and yes.
Yeah, and it just starts that simply, past 3 o'clock.
Yes.
And then you're off again. And that is actually reminded me really of the choir last year. With it. They had so much fun in it, because there was always a twinkle in their eye.
Yeah.
And there has to be, that joy has always got to be there, because the audience, our audiences are coming very often. For them, we often hear, "Oh my goodness, the 16th Christmas concert. That's the start of Christmas for us." brilliant. That's lovely. In the same way that when people come to our Messiah or something, and there, with Messiah, you've got the biggest liturgical work ever.
Yes, I was going to ask you about the Messiah, Harry, because one, I think you performed it this week at St. Martin's in the Fields, didn't you?
Yes.
But
yes.
I think of all the composers, it's the one that Dickens mentions more than any other. Handel crops up in his novels all over the place. But
and the thing is with Messiah, of course, today it's in people's minds it's synonymous with Christmas, but we have to remember that it was first performed at Easter, and that it is a piece that encompasses the Christian year. But as I say, particularly in the UK and in America, especially, it's absolutely synonymous with Christmas, and in America, Thanksgiving. You'll find in every major city in America there are 2 or 3 messiahs being done by the symphony orchestras in those places. I've recorded it now twice. I recorded it way back in 1985 when I very first started the orchestra. In fact, it was absolutely bizarre. The wonderful company called Hyperion that everybody knows. The founder of that was a fantastic guy called Ted Perry. And I phoned Ted up and said, look, Ted, I really want to record Messiah. And he said, have you got an orchestra? I said, no. And I said, but I will. I'll have one. I'm going to form a period orchestra, my group. And I said, I really want to record it. He said, have you ever performed it before? I said, well, yes, but I've not as me. I've sung in Messiahs. I've sort of rehearsed the choir for them for other people, and I've done one myself. And it was sort of silence. He said, and then he said, yes, I'll record it. Well, wow. So he's recording somebody who's never performed Messiah the night before and hasn't got his own orchestra. So that was 1985, and it was a really pared down Messiah. It was only 16 singers. It was strings. I'm not sure if I had any oboes. In fact, it wasn't a replica of the Dublin performance where there weren't any oboes. But it was pretty scaled down, and yes. It was a massive success. I can't listen to it today because it's so different from my approach today. And back in 2010, I think I re-recorded it on Coro with soloists who had come through the ranks of the 16 and ended up there being stars. Caroline Sampson, Mark Padmore, Chris Purvis. They'd all been in the group for the best part of 10 years, and now they're fully fledged soloists. So that was wonderful. So bringing that back, and the alto soloist was Catherine Wynne Rogers, who had sung it so many times for me anyway. And it is an incredible piece. And as you mentioned before, we did it at St. Martin in the Fields on Tuesday with 2 what I would call younger soloists, but brilliant, and 2 more established soloists who I've known for years. But as a quartet, they were just staggering. They were all, what makes Messiah special in concert is when you have 4 soloists that are text-led, but they're also stage animals, and they communicate with the audience. And our Messiah is one of, I think I'd sat through so many performances of Messiah and seen ones on television and recordings where, you do a chorus and then they turn the page and then you start the aria or the recit, and there's no sort of sense of direction or trajectory through the piece and no drama, and it's the sort of simple thing with Messiah is that on the front page of when Handel first wrote it, and there were reasons why he did this, but he's called it an entertainment. And in my mind, that's what it is. It is also a sacred oratory, of course it is. But if we don't treat it as a drama, I'm using entertainment in the sense of drama, opera, then I don't think we get the best out of it. And for me, the beauty of having different soloists each time I do it is that each of those soloists brings something special. They bring their own interpretation, which we can then in rehearsal mold. And then, because with Messiah, I take an aria like Rejoice Greatly, the soprano aria. Some sopranos like it really, they like to do their coloratura really fast. Some need to take it steadier. Tempos vary. So I have to take that into account to how I relate the movements around it. So I don't just have an idea that I'm doing, or just a child is born at a strict tempo and I do it the same every single time. I don't. I mold it. And I have a vision of how I'm going to get from the overture to Worthy of the Lamb and the Amen chorus at the very end. So I'm taking the audience on a journey. And I think somebody asked me the other day I should write a book on my interpretation of Messiah, and the trouble is, unless somebody actually asked me the questions, and I don't really know. I'm there in the moment, and it happened. And what was lovely the other day, I had all my 6 regular sopranos, and my goodness me, it told, they were just amazing. A chorus like "For unto us a child is born." He writes it, "For unto us a child is born." So it's a sort of, the underlay is a bit odd, and people sort of criticize Handel for, oh, he's a German trying to write in English, but actually just make it work. Caress the F of for unto. So you're using the introduction "for" unto us as a kind of a cupped upbeat, which is just gathering everybody's attention. And then when you get to all the parts that then go, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." So with the word, you've got those rests, then make the sibilants sort of carry over the "unto us a son is given." So it's the sense of the words is going forward, that you're never chopping it up. The rest is there, but you're not chopping the music up. I don't know if
that does make sense, because I think that's a running theme with all of your work, Harry, is you understand dramatic tension, and where there is a sense of sometimes pushing against the grain of something and make it, like you said, make it work.
Yeah, yes.
But I love that you mentioned "Worthy is the Lamb" and "Amen" at the end, because as you were saying about carols earlier about homophonic into polyphonic, and that's a fantastic, stark example of the two types. If listeners want to know something that's homophonic to something that's polyphonic,
absolutely.
And the fact that that final chorus, which is absolutely shattering at the end, it's so beautiful, isn't it? And it's one word, word the whole time.
One word. You have to work at the Amen chorus to really make it come alive in a very special way. I mean, it will always be great. It will always be. I mean, it doesn't matter what the performance is, even if it's with a harmonium, or it's with piano, or you've got the luxury of an orchestra. But to make it even greater, you just look at the way Handel writes it, and the way he starts it with just the choir, each part coming on in after each other, and then suddenly the strings take over, they have their say. And then you suddenly have everybody coming in together. And it's a whole, I talk a lot about in Baroque music, but it stems from Renaissance music, about architecture. The phrase goes upwards, you add a small crescendo. The phrase comes down, you add a small diminuendo. So it needs that architecture being shaped all the time. And by the time you get to the middle of the Amen chorus, you've got phrases that are starting going upwards. You have phrases starting higher up, coming down. You have crotchets that have slight daggers on them. You have minims, half notes that should have expression. So you've got how many things there? You've got 1, 2, 3. You've got about 5 different elements that all need to be doing their thing. And actually, if you use that architecture, with Handel on such a long chorus, that you feed the sound, you go to a certain length, and then you bring it back, and then you go a little bit further, and then of course you realise when the sopranos hit their top A at the end, and then they follow a few beats later by the tenors hitting theirs, you've really got something that's absolutely staggering. And every time we get to that point, I get a shiver down my spine. I must have conducted Messiah well over 200 times. It's always great.
Yes, you are definitely qualified to write the book then, Harry. I think. Come on. But a carol that I wanted to run by you, Harry, is mentioned in Dickens' A Christmas Carol is God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen.
Yes.
And I just think that's, of the traditionals, that's an absolutely stunning one.
It's a very interesting carol, because we were mentioning earlier about the Oxford Book of Carols and the way that Paul Williams and Martin Shaw and Warlock and people like that went up and down the country seeking the tunes. There are two very distinct tunes to God Rest. We only ever hear the one, which is known as it's the London melody. There's another one that I'm not sure where it comes from. We never hear it today, which has just reminded me that one day I must do it. God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. It's a long carol. It's in the minor. It ends in the major, obviously, but it's very much got that minor feel about it. Rest you merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Great text, isn't it? Remind me, which it comes in Christmas Carol, doesn't it?
It does, yes. There's a carol singer that stoops down at Scrooge's keyhole and sings through the keyhole, and Scrooge throws a ruler at him.
That's right.
But actually, it is minor, isn't it? But actually, it's incredibly joyous as well, and people really, it has a sort of energy and a pace or something about it.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I'm just looking at it here, 8 verses long. I don't think these days people sing all 8 verses. I think the usual thing is to sing about 5 or 6 of them, and the last of them are cut out. Yeah, because I'm just looking at the 7th verse here. Now, to the Lord sing praises, all you within this place, like we true loving brethren, each other to embrace. For the merry time of Christmas is drawing on apace, and then it's tidings of comfort and joy. And it's that chorus which is just so brilliant. Comfort and joy. I love that.
Yes,
he repeats it, and it's tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. It's tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. It's simple, it's memorable, and no wonder it's a big traditional favourite.
But also just listening right across your Christmas albums, that melody that comes up in so many other patterns and forms in other carols, doesn't it? If you listen to the tune of this wassail song, it's identical to God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, except that it has a dotted rhythm rather than a straight rhythm.
Here we come a-wassailing among the leaves so green. Here we come a-wandering so fair to
One of the great thrills of my life was when I chose one year to set down my own arrangement of Good King Wenceslas and sent it to you, and you recorded it with, obviously, 16 and Alexander Armstrong as a guest.
Yes.
And that was so amazing. I mean, I couldn't be there for the recording because I was doing a show in Bristol.
Of course you could.
So I completely missed out on hearing it live. But what are your recollections of that?
That was great. That was St. Augustine's, Kilburn. I remember it was very cold. Luckily, everybody was in big Christmas jumpers, and Alexander he was just brilliant. He was so game for doing it. And what a great, another great story as well.
That's a very big story, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, that's a very clear story, isn't it?
Yeah. And so, it's that sort of picture book Christmas, isn't it? Deep and crisp and even and everything. It's also one where I have a real problem with, again, with overblown arrangements.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a big fan of the one in Carols for the very first Carols for Choirs. Of course, it has the men singing "Give the Page Stand By Me," and it has the ladies singing "Sorry Lives a Goodly Kent." But oh my goodness me, the harmonies underneath it that's going on. I honestly, I'm a real pedant. It made me cringe.
Yes, no, I'm so relieved that my harmonies make the cut. You weren't offended by because I do agree with you, because I was trying to work in the Russian troika melody that Prokofiev uses, and put that into the harmony a little bit. And it's quite concealed. So
yours worked brilliantly.
Bring me flesh and bring me wine, bring me pine logs hither. Thou and I will see him dine when we bear them thither. Age and morn, forth they went together. Through the woodlands while lament, time the bitter
talking about God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen again as well, there's something that you choose to do, and this is something that fascinates me as well, working on Shakespeare as well, when to do this, when not to do this. So if I take a line from God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, the shepherds at those tidings rejoiced much in mind, rejoiced for a start, rejoiced much in mind, and left their flocks a feeding in tempest, storm and wind.
Yes.
What do? Do you say wind? Do you say wind? When is it right to do? How do you make these calls, Harry? When you're looking at?
I know it's those sort of calls are communal call. I look at everybody and say, what are we going to do? I probably used to go wind, be a pedant because it's rhyming. It's very funny. We always do the music at the Oxford and Cambridge Club for their traditional Christmas dinner. I think it's coming up on it's coming Monday, and if God Rest You Merry is ever on, you'll get half of them, and it'll be the more vocal ones going wind, and they sort of look around each other to take sort of, yes, I got it right, and then there'll be other ones who just sort of say it normally. It's interesting, isn't it, with carols, because it's to me they're also like hymns. Do you punctuate everywhere? Do you go through ends of lines? Do you make the punctuations in the middle of a line of a stanza? Do you punctuate it there? I'm very one that sort of, when we're performing these things, we try and make the punctuation natural. They're all in verse, we'll very often go through at the end of a line when we've got the sense going through. We may not break in the middle of a line because that is upsetting the tune, but we'll sort of, what I call, turn the corner. We'll make the punctuation. We make sense. Put it this way: we make sense of the punctuation within the tune that we're singing. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it can be a real challenge for a composer, I think, as well, dealing with verse and deciding how much to honour the meter that's already in there and how much you can pull it around and stretch it. I think Benjamin Britten does one of the sonnets, maybe Sonnet 19, and I'm not so keen on that one because I feel like it's kind of pulled around a little bit too much. Yeah. That's my own personal taste. Although I should give an honourable mention to his Ceremony of Carols, which are extraordinary. My favourite, This Little Babe.
That's my favourite. Yeah, that's my favourite.
Is it your favourite?
It really is. But that stems way back. Again, every child chorister will have it. Will have performed Ceremony of Carols because it's just brilliant. And I remember it was a BBC broadcast as well. It was in the chapter house of Canterbury Cathedral. And I remember Alan Wicks, who was our choir master there, he just loved Britten's music. But we made a pretty gutsy sound with Alan, and there's a lot of low notes in Ceremony of Carols. He'd be always going, dig out those low notes. I want. And apparently the harpist, she was a lady. Alan used to say she was very interesting, very, very famous. It might have been Marisa Rubis or something like that. I don't know. It could have been. No idea who it was. It's a very long time. I'm talking about the early 1960s. But I recorded Ceremony of Carols with my lot, which it's always heard with boys, obviously, but I've recorded it with the ladies and some of the male altos. And funny enough, it is one of Britain's most joyful pieces written at a time when he was in total despair. I mean, it's just staggering. Here he was coming back from America to face the English public as a conscientious objector. I suppose he could have been a lot of criticism of him. And he was in the depths of despair. He bought a little anthology of medieval poems, and on the way back he wrote ceremonial carols and wrote it for women's voices. And it's amazing. And this little babe, I mean, is just so clever, because you've got the harp, I mean, harp is, in a way, they sort of, their fingers will be well bruised by the end of it, or because they're plucking away on this incessant, and it's exhilarating. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And Harry, rehearsing that with the top lines echoing each other, chasing each other. What is that, a bit of a tangle, or is that clearer and easier to do?
Yeah, no, it's a great fun piece to do. I mean, we love it. I mean, when we recorded it, because I did use adult voices, ladies, and I think I had one or two male alters. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a certain Dame Sarah Connolly who's in the outer line on that disc, when she was singing the choir. This is great. But what we did is we had a language coach trying to get some of the medieval pronunciation across, and it actually produced some really interesting sounds. I mean, the fascinating thing is, of course, as soon as you get a language coach on anything that's to do with medieval English, etc., it was fascinating, because I remember her saying, well, it's really difficult, this, because each of the poems that Britain chose come from a different part of the country with a different dialect. And I said, well, look, hang on, don't confuse us. Let's just let's sort of home in on one sort of way of pronouncing it that is actually going to work for the whole piece. Because, but it was fascinating. So you got younger child, but it really lent itself, and I think Britain would have actually liked us doing that. It's one of his last work he ever wrote, the choirs, which is Sacred and Profane. That's all medieval text as well, and there's a lot of his phonetics in that, and so he was obviously quite keen on trying to get a taste of some kind of more ancient sound.
Harry, this has been such a thrill to talk to you. I had a very scholarly parting question to ask you, which was quite simply, do you have a favourite Christmas carol this year?
Oh, this year? Oh, gosh. I mean, I'm an absolute sucker for Ding Dong Merrily on High. I just love it. It's just so glorious.
Ding dong merrily on high, in heaven the bells are ring. Ding dong merrily the sky is ring with angels sing.
But I'm a sucker for all of the carols, and when I find one that I don't know and I've not come across, I remember the Gloucestershire Wassail was an absolute find for me. It was brilliant. That one we can never do in performance, because when we recorded it, it's got about 8 verses. Just bear with me a sec, because I'm just going to look it up. So this is another one out of my legendary Oxford Book of Carols. We're talking about growing up with carols. I just noticed this Oxford Book of Carols was bought for me by my mum when I was at Canterbury Choir School.
Wow.
My name is like Choir School, Canterbury Cathedral, 1966. She bought it from at Christmas, 1966, and I was singing there. But the Gloucester Wassail, it's got 8 verses, so it's Wassail all over the town. Our toast is white, our ale it is brown. But then it's got all these verses, and here is to Dobbin and to his right eye. Another one is, so here is to Broad May, here is to Filly Pale and to her left ear. And we had such difficulty at recording it, because as soon as the gents, because again, I did it in a sort of just a round carol, it's sort of just with circular motion, starting with the gents, then the ladies do a verse, and then everybody joins together by the time we get to the end. And whenever the ladies did a verse, they got the text absolutely perfect. Whenever the men did a verse, there was somebody getting the wrong word, and we were just weeping with laughter through this whole session. On the disc, it's absolutely fine because all the words are in the right place. But I think you can hear the jollity that's going on every time. And there's no way I could put that in a concert performance, because I don't think we'd even start it, because the choir would be laughing straight away.
That's wonderful. I think that's the carol to end on then. We'll play out our interview. Harry, thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure, Dominic. Nice to chat.
Lovely to chat, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Likewise.
Wassail all over the town, our toast it is white and our ale it is brown, our bonnet is made of the white maple tree, with a wassail all we drink to thee.
So here is to Cherry and to his red cheek, pray God send our master a good piece of beef, and a good piece of beef, that may we all see.
With a wassail all we drink to thee. And here is to Dobbin and to his right eye, pray God send our master a good Christmas pie, and a good Christmas pie, that may we all see. With a wassail all we drink to thee.
Thank you for listening to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire. If you're enjoying these episodes and would like to make a small donation towards the costs of producing them, please follow the link at the bottom of the description and you can make a donation there. Every coffee you buy makes a huge difference. Thank you ever so much, and see you next time.